Thank you, Andy and Rebecca. I think that's something, whether it's a business, family, a tool that everybody could use and really benefit from it. What I'm going to talk about is kids and activity, and so just to start some guidelines, it's recommended kids get an activity of 60 minutes to moderate of vigorous activity a day. A lot of countries recommend 3 hours of activity, which is about 15 minutes of activity per hour, which seems pretty reasonable to me. Do most kids in the U.S. get that amount of activity? Unfortunately, not. And so there's a study that followed high schoolers for 4 years, and 90% of the kids were not getting that amount of activity, which kind of led further into their life, in college, future life, just about 10% of, adults exercise. So, it starts when we're young. We start forming these habits when we're younger. When you add in optimal sleep, which is about 8 to 12 hours, depending on how old you are, optimal exercise, which is about 60 minutes, and then, optimal technology time, which is 2 hours or less a day. Only 1 in 20 kids reach that. So that's only 5% of our kids are getting the proper amount of sleep, proper amount of exercise, and only using a screen 2 or less hours a day. And so those are pretty staggering statistics when you think about it. That only 5% of our kids can't reach those kind of bare minimum guidelines. So why do so few of these kids meet these guidelines? I think a lot of it has to do with technology. If you look at the kids that grow up with technology, if you drive through a neighborhood these days, you hardly ever see a whole group, a whole gang of kids in the neighborhood running around playing ball tag, playing basketball in the yards. A lot of them are inside on their phones, technologies. So I think that has to do with a lot of what we're seeing. Teenagers spend 9 hours a day in technology. 7 of those hours are screen time. The other 2 hours music, Facebook, this or that. Tweens ages 8 to 12 spend 6 hours a day in technology. That's 4.5 hours of screen time. So that's a lot of time spending on a screen. Only 10% of kids are getting an hour of activity. We could reduce that screen time, get outside a little bit. Also, I think another thing is that's decreasing in the number of activity people are getting is the decline in youth sports. So in 2008, 45% of the kids 6 to 12 played sports. In 2018, there's only 38% of kids that were playing youth sports. I think a couple things add to that too. I think more people are getting more competitive early on in sports. I think that's playing a role. Not as many kids are playing multiple sports. Also too, it's just not as fun when you get so competitive early. Once we get through this year, it'll be interesting to see what the numbers do after COVID, after a year of kids not being able to do sports. Hopefully, it doesn't decline even more. So, what kind of activity should a kid be getting? Really a mixture of activity. Kids should be getting the organized sports activity, organized activity, but they also should be getting the unorganized activity. This is where they can really work on their creativity, working with other kids, interpersonal skills. It's okay to get angry at somebody. I got angry at them for doing this in the game. I broke the rules. That's okay to figure all that out. So they need both kind of non-structured playtime and also structured playtime. So make sure you're getting your kid both. That's really where they learn how to develop. It's important in a team activity or any kind of activity to be able to follow directions, work as a team. Be told what to do. That's all stuff that'll help you later in your career. When should kids start playing competitive sports? And so it's different for everyone, but kind of a good guideline about 8 years old. And so not everyone develops at the same speed. Dr. Lexi was talking about kids being like popcorn kernels. Everyone pops at a little different age. Roughly about 8 years old is when they can start playing competitive sports. Just because they're playing competitive sports doesn't mean it's win or nothing. Have fun with it. Let the kids develop. Let the kids have fun. Make sure you're kind of teaching them why they're playing sports. Teach them how to excel and not just win. If they learn how to play to excel, how to play to their best performance, figure out, okay, I could have done this better. That's all stuff that'll make them happier in sports, but also in life as well. And also, don't specialize, so early. Large majority of kids never going to go on to play high school or never going to go on to play college sports, professional sports. So I think just understanding that, your kid's most likely not going to play, college sports. That's okay. Let them play to the level that they're comfortable with. Let them have fun. Let them enjoy it. When should a kid start to strength train? Same as about competitive sports. So a kid can start strength training at about 7 to 8 years old. This doesn't mean take them to the gym, put them under the squat rack, have them squat as much as they can. Build into this. I was reading a study from 2015. I really like the way they laid this out. It's called the Composite Youth Model. And so in the Composite Youth Model, in phase 1, that's age 2 to 4. So in phase 1, at this age, you're working on the fundamental motor skills and building the neuromuscular pathways they need to coordinate movement. So, and that, an example of this would be have your kid bounce a balloon one hand to the other. This is all little simple things that seems really basic, but working on right hand, left hand, watching the balloon in the air. So this is stuff you can do with the kids. All your kids in there, see how many times you can bounce a balloon in the air before it hits the ground. I remember that stuff we did all the time as kids. With your kid, challenge them to bounce it with one eye closed, the other eye is closed. This is stuff that's supposed to be social, supposed to be fun. You can train your kid to be a good athlete without even knowing them when they're young. And so this is stuff, have fun with your kid at this age. And that's what it's all about. Phase 2, age 5 to 12. This is when you can start introducing your kids to multiple sports and activities. Don't focus on one sport like I was talking about earlier. If all you do is have your kid pitch, they're probably going to get some kind of repetitive stress injury, repetitive motion injury. Let them develop, let them learn a bunch of different sports. This will learn a lot of different skill movements, a lot of different brain development with the different sports. This is when you're going to be teaching your kids this fundamental movement skills, agility, strength, endurance, hypertrophy, building muscle. So this is when you can start your basic strength training, focus more on plyometrics, things like that, starting to teach them the basic skills of being an athlete and trying to improve their performance. Phase 3, 13 to 20. This is when you can start doing more advanced strength training, more advanced conditioning. This is one, if you're going to start introducing some Olympic lifting, you can introduce some of those more compounded exercises. This is when you start getting developed, you kind of your regular workout routines, regular, sports practices. Another one I was reading, one is too much for sports. How much is too much activity for a kid? They were saying a good guideline to go is about an hour of practice a week. So if your kid's 12 years old, 12 hours of practice in a week is probably a proper amount. The rest of that should be unstructured playtime. These habits will carry over into adulthood, and so the more you can train routine, the more you can train kind of goals, I think the better off a kid will be moving forward in life. And so kind of just in overcap, stay active, keep it fun. You're the role model to your child. Kid's not going to know what to do unless you show them, and so be active yourself. As an adult, I know when we were getting a nutritional certification, they talked a lot about, well, your kid's not going to eat broccoli if you don't eat broccoli. Your kid's not going to exercise if you don't do some kind of exercise. So be the role model for your kid. And also too, one adult consult an expert. While exercising is safe for kids, you can weight train. You need to do it right. If you hurt yourself when you're younger, you can start developing musculoskeletal imbalances that are going to really affect you when you're older. A lot of stuff we've seen here has been going on for 7 to 15 years. It just hasn't showed up, pain-wise for that long. The body's great at adapting. If you start working out wrong, it's going to be really hard to change when you're older. So make sure your child is developing properly. If they do start working out, weight training, lifting, make sure they're doing it properly. If you don't know how to do it yourself, consult an expert. That's why people go to school. That's why people train, so they can teach you or teach your child what to do properly. So make sure you're getting an expert if you don't know. And most of all, just have fun. And so Dr. B is going to take it over from here. He's going to go a little bit more on the emotional side of things.
With one more surprise guest speaker, so I don't know, Pam and Lee, are you both speaking, or Pam, which one are you? No, this is good. Come on up. So
Okay.